They were the faces the world loved. Legends, idols, voices of a generation, until the courtroom lights replaced the spotlight. One day they were icons. The next, they were defendants. Few places on earth know how to build people up like Hollywood does. And fewer still know how to tear them down with such ruthless precision. This is not a story about guilt or innocence. It's a story about fame on trial. About what happens when celebrity collides with scandal, and the whole world is invited to watch. Tonight, we descend into 3 of the most infamous court cases in the history of entertainment. We'll walk into the shadow of Neverland with Michael Jackson, feel the cultural earthquake caused by O.J. Simpson, and trace the decades-long exile of Roman Polanski. Each case, a mirror, not only of the stars themselves, but of the world watching them. What do we see when we place fame under oath? Before we begin this descent into scandal and silence, I'd like to thank you for joining me. If you find comfort in stories told with care, history whispered softly into the night, I invite you to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Tell me, from where in the world are you listening right now, and what time is it there? I always find it beautiful to imagine this story traveling across time zones, gently settling into the ears of someone just like you. Whether you're drifting off to sleep, folding laundry, or simply escaping the noise of the day, this space is yours. And now, the story begins. Before the headlines, the allegations, or the trial transcripts, there was brilliance. Pure, electrifying brilliance. Michael Jackson didn't just step into the spotlight. He reshaped it. Born in Gary, Indiana, in 1958, Michael was just 6 years old when he began performing with his brothers in what would become the Jackson 5. But even then, among a group of energetic siblings, he stood out, not just for his voice, but for something harder to define, a presence. By the time he launched his solo career in the late 1970s, the world was already watching. But what followed? Off the Wall, then Thriller, and later Bad, was something no one could have predicted. With Thriller alone, Michael Jackson didn't just dominate charts, he changed the music industry forever. The album became the best-selling of all time, and its music videos, especially the legendary 14-minute horror-themed spectacle, helped shape MTV, merge music with film, and establish the music video as a true art form. He wasn't just a pop star. He was a global force, the king of pop. Across borders, cultures, and languages, his music connected millions. From his moonwalk debut on live television to his red leather jackets, single sequined glove, and gravity-defying dance moves, Michael Jackson became the most recognizable human on earth. But it wasn't just the visuals. It was the emotion. His voice could shatter with vulnerability on "She's Out of My Life," roar with power on "Beat It," or swell with global hope on "Heal the World." His artistry wasn't just performance. It was transformation. And with his fame came a mythology. Michael wasn't merely admired, he was revered. He built Neverland, a sprawling estate that blended childhood fantasy with celebrity extravagance. A place many saw as the reflection of a man who had lost his youth to fame and was forever chasing it back. He donated millions to charity, broke racial barriers on television, and used his platform for global causes. But as his fame grew, so did the whispers. The eccentricity, the changing appearance, the reclusive behavior, it all fed a growing curiosity. The same public that once celebrated his talent began to scrutinize his life beyond the stage. Still, at this point in his story, he was untouchable. A living legend. A symbol of what celebrity could look like at its most dazzling and most delicate. But the higher you climb, the further you can fall. And for Michael Jackson, the fall wouldn't come in the form of fading fame. It would come in the form of accusations, cameras in courtrooms, and a world unsure of what to believe. Before all of that, though, before the trials and controversies, he was simply a boy who could sing like no one else. And he became a man who changed music forever. There's a moment in every story where light begins to flicker. When admiration turns to uncertainty, and applause quiets into doubt. For Michael Jackson, that moment came in 1993. At the time, he was still riding a wave of untouchable fame. He had performed at the Super Bowl that year, an event watched by over 90 million people. His Dangerous World Tour drew massive crowds across continents. He had, in every way, transcended pop stardom. But behind the scenes, a quiet storm was brewing. One that would soon erupt with such force, it would forever divide public opinion on the man the world had once embraced without question. In the summer of 1993, the Los Angeles Police Department opened an investigation into Michael Jackson following an allegation by a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler. The claim was serious, accusations of inappropriate behavior, and almost immediately, the media seized upon it like wildfire. The words, Michael Jackson, and child abuse, had never appeared in the same sentence before. And for fans, for journalists, and for those in the entertainment world, the collision of innocence and allegation was shocking, even surreal. At the center of it all was Neverland Ranch, a sprawling estate filled with animals, amusement rides, and a staff that catered to Jackson's every wish. To many, it was a magical escape. To others, suddenly, it became a setting of suspicion. As the case unfolded, the headlines grew more chaotic. Every detail, every photograph of Michael with a child, every moment spent behind the gates of Neverland, was re-examined under a new, more sinister lens. There were denials. There were interviews. There were legal maneuvers on all sides. In public, Michael Jackson insisted on his innocence. In a now famous televised statement, he appeared pale, trembling, and deeply emotional, describing the pain of being falsely accused and the invasive medical examinations he had undergone to cooperate with the investigation. Meanwhile, his career was quietly unraveling under the pressure. He cancelled tour dates, entered a treatment facility for dependency on painkillers, and became more withdrawn from public life. Yet something about the case didn't follow a clear script. There were no criminal charges filed at the time. Instead, the situation took a turn when Jackson reached a civil settlement with the Chandler family for a reported sum of over $20 million. The settlement, his team insisted, was not an admission of guilt, but a desire to protect his emotional well-being and avoid a prolonged, damaging trial. But in a court of public opinion, things were no longer black and white. For some, the settlement was proof of wrongdoing. For others, it was the desperate move of a man crushed by false accusations and a media machine spinning out of control. What made it harder was that Michael Jackson had always cultivated an image of childlike wonder. He often said he related more to children than adults. He welcomed young visitors to Neverland with open arms and open heart. But now, that very openness was being reframed as something darker. The world didn't know what to believe. And in the vacuum of clarity, rumors thrived. The press circled like sharks. Tabloids printed stories that blurred fact with fiction. And beneath it all, the foundation of Jackson's legacy began to shift. It was a turning point. Not just in his life, but in how the world viewed him. A moment when the music no longer played loud enough to drown out the questions. This was just the beginning of the scrutiny. And for Michael Jackson, the innocence he once symbolized would never again be so easily believed. There are moments in history when a decision made behind closed doors echoes louder than any public declaration. In the winter of 1994, Michael Jackson's decision to settle a civil lawsuit would become one of those moments. After months of relentless headlines, public speculation, and media trials that played out in every living room, the legal team representing Jackson and the family of Jordan Chandler reached a confidential financial settlement. The figure, though officially undisclosed at the time, was widely reported to be in the range of $20 to $23 million, a staggering sum by any standard. But more staggering still was what it meant. For many, it was a quiet end to a very loud scandal. For others, it was the loudest admission imaginable. The civil lawsuit, filed by the Chandler family, ran parallel to a criminal investigation. But when the settlement was finalized, the criminal case was left with no cooperative witness. Jordan Chandler, through his family's legal counsel, chose not to testify. This didn't automatically end the criminal probe. But without his testimony, prosecutors found themselves with a case they could not take to court. To be clear, and this is vital, Michael Jackson was never convicted of any crime in this case, and he consistently maintained his innocence. His legal team emphasized that the settlement was not an admission of guilt, but rather a strategic move to avoid a prolonged media circus, emotional exhaustion, and further damage to Jackson's already fragile health. They framed it as a business decision, a necessary evil, a way to move forward. But for the public, moving forward wasn't so simple. If innocence was on his side, why the payout? And if guilt was hidden behind the money, what did that say about the justice system? The questions outlived the answers. In the weeks that followed, opinion pieces filled the newspapers. Talk shows debated ethics and image. And fans, many of whom had grown up idolizing Jackson, found themselves divided. Some believed the settlement was proof of compassion. That he didn't want to drag a child through a grueling trial. That his fame had made him a target, and money was simply the price of peace. Others saw it as suspicious. As if the shine of Neverland had cracked just enough to let doubt slip through. And perhaps most complicated of all was the fact that Michael Jackson's public identity was so closely tied to innocence itself. He wasn't just a singer. He was the boy who never grew up. The dreamer who built a fantasy land to reclaim the childhood that fame had stolen. So when those ideals collided with courtroom terms like settlement and civil suit, it felt like more than legal strategy. It felt like the unraveling of a myth. In the years that followed, the settlement became a reference point. A chapter that was never fully closed. Whenever his name re-entered the headlines, the public remembered, not the details, necessarily, but the shadow of a choice made quietly. It's easy to forget, in the age of clickbait and viral accusations, how deeply the public once trusted their idols. And it's even easier to overlook how fragile that trust really was. Michael Jackson returned to music after the settlement. He toured. He recorded. He accepted awards. But something had shifted, something subtle but permanent. There were no charges. No trial. No verdict. Only a check. And a silence that said both everything and nothing at all. Just when the world thought the storm had passed, a single piece of media lit the match again. In 2003, nearly a decade after the first allegations against Michael Jackson had shaken the foundations of his legacy, a new controversy emerged. This time, fueled not by rumors or lawsuits, but by a documentary seen by millions around the globe. Titled Living with Michael Jackson, and hosted by British journalist Martin Bashir, the documentary promised a rare and intimate look into Jackson's personal life, his parenting, his fame, and most notably, his relationship with children. What began as a calm exploration of the man behind the myth quickly veered into deeply uncomfortable territory. In one of the most widely discussed segments, Jackson, speaking candidly and without apparent fear, defended sharing his bed with young guests at Neverland, calling it an innocent expression of love and trust. To his most loyal fans, his words were misunderstood, a reflection of his enduring childlike nature. But to many others, it set off alarm bells. The public reaction was immediate and intense. What might have once seemed eccentric now felt alarming. The image of Jackson had shifted again, this time not through court documents, but through his own voice on film. And then, just weeks later, new allegations surfaced. This time from a different boy, Gavin Arvizo, a young cancer survivor whom Jackson had befriended and featured prominently in the documentary. The accusations echoed the past, but now they came in a world that had already seen this story once before. On November 20th, 2003, Michael Jackson was arrested at the age of 45. He turned himself in wearing a crisp suit, handcuffed briefly for photographs that would circle the globe. The image, one of the world's most beloved entertainers being booked by law enforcement, was as surreal as it was heartbreaking for those who had idolized him. He was charged with multiple counts, including lewd acts with a minor and administering alcohol to facilitate alleged misconduct. The charges were far more serious this time, and the legal battle that followed would become one of the most high-profile celebrity trials in modern history. Jackson's legal team immediately went on the offensive. Led by Thomas Mesereau, his defense was firm. The allegations were false, opportunistic, and driven by people seeking fame, money, or both. They painted a picture of a generous man taken advantage of, again. But prosecutors told a different story. They presented testimony, timelines, and attempts to establish a pattern. They dug into his behavior, his finances, even his love of Peter Pan, trying to connect it all to a darker narrative. For more than 4 months in 2005, the courtroom became a theater. Witnesses came and went. Former employees, family members, celebrity friends, all pulled into the gravitational force of the case. Even Macaulay Culkin, Jackson's longtime friend, testified, defending Jackson with unwavering loyalty. The public, once again, was riveted. Cable news ran near constant coverage. Talk shows speculated endlessly. And around Neverland Ranch, crowds of supporters and critics gathered, separated by signs and police tape, but united in their fixation. Michael Jackson, meanwhile, seemed physically and emotionally drained. At times arriving late, at times appearing visibly weak, he became a fragile figure under the weight of global attention. And yet, despite the severity of the charges, there was doubt. Inconsistencies in testimonies, questions about motives. Defense attorneys revealed that the Arvizo family had a history of legal disputes and prior accusations against others. Finally, after months of headlines, tension, and whispered debates across dinner tables worldwide, the verdict came in. Not guilty. On all counts. The courtroom gasped. Jackson wept. And once again, he walked away without a conviction. But even without a guilty verdict, his reputation had been altered forever. Innocence in the eyes of the law does not always restore trust in the eyes of the public. Some cheered his exoneration. Others remained skeptical, uneasy with the contradictions that had surfaced. What was undeniable, however, was that Michael Jackson would never again be viewed solely as a performer. From this moment on, his legacy would always carry an asterisk, a symbol not of certainty, but of complexity. He returned to Neverland, but not to peace. The music industry had moved on. The world had changed. And he, now, was a man both vindicated and haunted. This chapter didn't just reignite the fire around his name. It ensured that it would never go out. The year was 2005, and inside a small courthouse in Santa Maria, California, one of the most surreal legal dramas in pop culture history was quietly unfolding. Not a made-for-TV movie, not a scripted performance, but a real trial, with real consequences, and a global audience holding its breath. Michael Jackson, once the invincible king of pop, now sat just feet away from the jury box, not as a performer, but as a defendant. And from day one, it felt like something more than a legal proceeding. It was theater. It was tragedy. It was history unraveling in real time. The prosecution began with intensity. They brought forward the Arvizo family, placing Gavin Arvizo, the young accuser, front and center. He spoke about his time at Neverland, the alleged misconduct, and how what once felt like magic slowly shifted into something darker. But almost immediately, cracks began to show. The defense, led by the sharp and measured Thomas Mesereau, poked holes in the family's timeline. They revealed prior lawsuits, inconsistent statements, and a history of financial disputes involving the Arvizo family. Witnesses were called, some familiar, some obscure. Among them, Macaulay Culkin, who took the stand and firmly denied ever experiencing inappropriate behavior at Neverland. Chris Tucker, who testified about the Arvizo family's odd behavior and how he had once warned Jackson to be cautious. One former Neverland employee testified to seeing questionable things, only for cross-examination to reveal that the employee had previously tried to sell their story to tabloids. Time and time again, the courtroom was pulled between accusation and doubt, between compelling narrative and conflicting truth. No one could deny the strangeness of it all. Testimonies overlapped but rarely aligned. Key dates were debated. Statements given to law enforcement differed from those delivered under oath. There was a fog that seemed to cover the case. Not of silence, but of too many voices saying too many different things. Even the tone of the courtroom shifted by the hour. At times solemn, at times chaotic, and at others painfully absurd, like when the jury had to examine Jackson's collection of art books or hear discussions about wine allegedly referred to as Jesus juice. It was easy to forget, amid the spectacle, that at its core, this was a case about one boy's claim and a global superstar's reputation. Outside the courthouse, another kind of performance unfolded. Fans from around the world gathered daily, waving banners, chanting prayers, holding signs that read, "We believe you, Michael." Some slept in tents. Others danced to his music in the streets, as if trying to summon a past that felt safer and simpler. They weren't just there for spectacle. They were there to protect a memory. To protect their Michael Jackson, the one who moonwalked across their childhoods. It was a devotion rarely seen. And it added a layer of surreal tension, a courtroom haunted by stardom, surrounded by a crowd refusing to let their hero fall. This wasn't just a criminal case, it was a cultural reckoning. Could someone so loved be capable of what was alleged? Could justice be served when the courtroom felt more like a circus ring? And could the truth survive the fog of fame? The prosecution fought to keep the narrative clear. The defense fought to show it was flawed. And the public, watching from living rooms and news feeds, found themselves torn. For some, it was simple, believe survivors. For others, it was just as simple. He's innocent until proven guilty, and maybe even then. Each day blurred into the next. Each witness stirred new speculation. Each moment brought us closer to the moment that would define the rest of Michael Jackson's life. Because once a verdict is read, it's not just a courtroom that responds, it's the entire world. And as the final days of the trial loomed, the question was no longer just what had happened at Neverland, but what would happen to the man who built it. The courtroom fell silent. All eyes fixed on the judge as the moment, that had held the world captive for months finally arrived. On June 13, 2005, the jury delivered their verdict in the Michael Jackson trial, not guilty on all counts. A verdict that reverberated across continents, carried by news broadcasts, newspaper headlines, and the endless chatter of a divided public. For Michael Jackson, it was a moment of relief, release, and exhaustion. He had spent nearly 2 years battling the allegations, months of intense court scrutiny, personal attacks, and the relentless weight of suspicion. In the courtroom, tears welled in his eyes. For many, it was the image of a man finally cleared of the charges that had shadowed him for so long. For others, it was a symbol of the complexities and contradictions of justice in the face of celebrity. But acquittal did not mean the end of the story. The emotional toll on Jackson was profound. The trial had peeled back layers of his private life, exposing him to public judgment far beyond what most endure. His health suffered, and the pressures of fame, combined with personal struggles, intensified. Critics and fans alike grappled with what the verdict meant. Some believed justice had been served. His loyal supporters viewed the outcome as vindication, a powerful statement against the often unforgiving media landscape. Yet many still questioned. The whispers never truly faded. Public opinion remained fractured, a delicate balance between forgiveness and doubt. Professionally, the trial marked a turning point. Michael Jackson never fully reclaimed the cultural dominance he once held. His music and public appearances grew increasingly rare, overshadowed by the lingering effects of the case. And perhaps most poignantly, his legacy, once almost untouchable, became a mosaic of brilliance and controversy. No longer could the world see just the king of pop. They also saw the man, flawed and human, caught in a saga of fame, pain, and redemption. In the years that followed, the verdict remained a defining chapter, not just in Jackson's life, but in the broader conversation about celebrity, justice, and the often blurry lines between truth and perception. It was a reminder that in the world of fame, the court of public opinion can be as influential, if not more so, than any legal decision. And for Michael Jackson, the acquittal was both a conclusion and a beginning. A moment to breathe. A moment to reflect. And a moment that shaped how history would remember him. After the thunderous echoes of the 2005 trial began to fade, Michael Jackson found himself navigating a world that had shifted beneath his feet. The man once known for electrifying stadiums with his dance moves and captivating millions with his voice now faced a quieter, more solitary chapter. The post-trial years were marked by a retreat from the dazzling spotlight that had defined his life for decades. No longer the unstoppable global icon touring the world, Jackson's public appearances became increasingly rare and guarded. Physically, the years took a toll. Reports emerged of his declining health, both mental and physical. Friends and insiders spoke of struggles with chronic pain, sleep issues, and the heavy burden of past traumas that haunted him still. Jackson's face, already a subject of intense public fascination, reflected these challenges. His once youthful features showed signs of weariness. His demeanor grew quieter, more introspective. This was a man isolating himself not only from the public but often from close friends and family. The protective walls around him grew higher, fueled by mistrust and a desire for privacy after years of relentless scrutiny. Though he sporadically teased the promise of new music or performances, these announcements rarely materialized. Instead, Jackson focused on smaller, more personal projects, often charitable in nature, or on moments spent away from cameras, and curious eyes. The world watched from a distance as the king of pop lived in the shadow of his own legend, a paradoxical existence of both immense fame and profound solitude. Yet even in isolation, his influence never truly dimmed. His music continued to inspire new generations. His philanthropic efforts quietly touched lives, and the legacy he built over decades remained firmly cemented in popular culture. But behind the scenes, the isolation was palpable. A poignant reminder of how fame, while dazzling and transformative, can also be deeply lonely. Michael Jackson's story in these years was not one of spectacle or sensational headlines. It was a tale of a man grappling with the complexities of his own humanity, seeking solace, peace, and perhaps a way to heal from the wounds inflicted by fame, controversy, and relentless public gaze. The story of Michael Jackson, like a complex symphony, did not conclude quietly but with a sudden, heart-stopping finale. On June 25, 2009, the world was stunned to learn that the king of pop had passed away at the age of 50. The cause: acute propofol and benzodiazepine intoxication, administered by his personal physician. His death sent shockwaves through the globe, sparking an outpouring of grief that transcended generations, cultures, and continents. For millions, it was a moment of collective mourning. The man who had gifted the world with timeless music, unforgettable performances, and an unmistakable charisma was gone. Tributes poured in from fellow artists, fans, and leaders alike, each acknowledging the indelible mark he left on the fabric of popular culture. But as the memorial candles burned, a different conversation quietly began to take shape. In the years following his death, Michael Jackson's life and legacy underwent intense re-examination. Documentaries like Leaving Neverland rekindled debates over the allegations that had long shadowed his career. These new narratives introduced harrowing testimonies that challenged how many viewed the king of pop. The public found itself grappling with a profound and often uncomfortable question. Can we separate the artist from the art? On one hand, his music, tracks that redefined genres, broke records, and united audiences, remained a testament to unmatched talent and creativity. On the other, the allegations and controversies, whether proven or presumed, cast a long, complicated shadow. The conversation spilled beyond courtrooms and fan forums. It permeated the cultural zeitgeist, shaping discussions on how society consumes art created by figures whose personal lives are marred by controversy. Streaming numbers fluctuated. Award shows debated whether to honor him posthumously. New generations discovered his songs while simultaneously navigating the complex history attached to his name. Yet, despite the turbulence, the impact of Michael Jackson's artistry is undeniable. He forever changed the music industry, dance, and the very nature of celebrity. His innovations in music videos, stagecraft, and visual storytelling set standards that artists still aspire to reach. His influence on fashion, philanthropy, and breaking racial barriers in entertainment continues to resonate. The legacy of Michael Jackson remains a tapestry woven with threads of genius, scandal, tragedy, and triumph. It is a legacy that invites us to reflect not only on the man behind the myth but on the complexities of fame, humanity, and forgiveness. As we listen to his music echo through time, the debate endures. How do we honor the art while confronting the questions about the artist? It's a question without an easy answer, one that lingers in the collective conscience, a whisper in the night that refuses to fade. As the final echoes of Michael Jackson's story linger in our minds, the complexities of fame, the shadows of controversy, and a legacy forever questioned, the stage shifts to another figure whose life became a lightning rod for public fascination and debate. O.J. Simpson, a man whose journey from celebrated athlete to notorious defendant captivated a nation and redefined the boundaries between celebrity and the justice system. Before the headlines turned dark, O.J. Simpson was the embodiment of American success and charm. A prodigious talent on the football field, Simpson's athletic prowess earned him the nickname, the Juice, as he dazzled fans with his speed and agility. His college career at USC was legendary, culminating in winning the coveted Heisman Trophy in 1968, a symbol of collegiate excellence and the promise of greatness. His transition to the professional NFL was seamless, breaking records and becoming one of the most electrifying running backs in history. He was more than an athlete, he was a cultural icon. With his charismatic smile and approachable demeanor, O.J. Simpson transcended sports to become a household name. Hollywood took notice, and soon he was starring in commercials, films, and television shows, cultivating a second career that capitalized on his charm and public appeal. From guest roles in popular series to his memorable performance in the Naked Gun film series, Simpson became known not only for his athletic achievements, but also for his ability to entertain. In the late 1970s and 1980s, O.J. Simpson was the epitome of American success, a beloved sports hero turned charismatic entertainer. He was a man who had seemingly conquered every arena he stepped into. But as history would reveal, beneath the polished exterior was a story far more complicated, a story that would grip the world in a way no sports victory ever could. On a quiet night in June 1994, a violent act shattered the illusion of peace in one of Los Angeles's most affluent neighborhoods, a crime that would send shockwaves rippling through the nation and forever alter the course of American history. Nicole Brown Simpson, the ex-wife of O.J. Simpson, and her close friend Ron Goldman were found brutally murdered outside her condominium. The scene was chilling, marked by tragedy and unanswered questions. Police arrived to a grisly tableau that defied explanation: two lifeless bodies, the evidence of a violent struggle, and a community gripped by horror. Nicole, once known for her radiant smile and ties to one of the country's most famous men, had met a brutal end. Ron Goldman, a young man with no apparent enemies, had become an unintended victim of this nightmare. The news broke quickly, igniting a media firestorm. Headlines screamed, cameras swarmed, and a nation found itself riveted. Not just by the crime, but by the darkening shadow it cast on a beloved sports icon. The media frenzy was relentless. Every detail, every rumor, every speculation was magnified and dissected in living rooms across America. For many, the murders were not just a tragic crime, they became a cultural event, a moment where race, celebrity, and justice collided in the most public of ways. Initial police investigations swiftly focused on O.J. Simpson as the prime suspect, given his turbulent history with Nicole and the public knowledge of their troubled relationship. The story was no longer just about the crime. It was about a man whose life had been built on fame and charisma and now facing the darkest chapter of all. As the investigation unfolded, so did the spectacle. The nation held its breath, watching a drama that combined real-life horror with the familiar faces of celebrity and scandal. It was a tragedy that demanded answers and ignited debates about domestic violence, race relations, and the power of the media to shape public perception. The murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman marked the beginning of what would become the trial of the century, a legal saga that would grip not only America but the entire world. Just days after the horrifying discovery of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman's murders, the world was suddenly gripped by a spectacle unlike any before it, one that blurred the lines between criminal pursuit and primetime television. On the evening of June 17, 1994, O.J. Simpson became the focus of a nationwide manhunt. But instead of a high-speed, dramatic chase, what unfolded was a slow-speed pursuit that captivated millions of viewers, live and in real time, across the United States. Inside the white Ford Bronco, Simpson sat as a passenger while his friend and former teammate, Al Cowlings, took the wheel. The car cruised through the highways of Los Angeles at a cautious pace, never faster than 40 miles per hour. What should have been a routine arrest instead morphed into an unprecedented media event. News helicopters hovered overhead, broadcasting the Bronco's every turn to a spellbound audience. Viewers tuned in across the country, glued to their televisions as the chase unfolded like a surreal drama. This was not just a police pursuit, it was a spectacle, a real-life soap opera playing out on the world's largest stage. The nation watched as law enforcement coordinated behind the scenes, negotiating with Simpson's legal team in a tense standoff that stretched for hours. The slow, deliberate pace of the chase seemed almost choreographed for the cameras, a bizarre dance between fugitive and law enforcement. For Simpson, the Bronco chase transformed him from suspect to spectacle, from athlete and actor to the face of one of the most sensational events in television history. Public opinion was deeply divided. Some saw him as a man overwhelmed by grief and despair, others as a calculated fugitive trying to evade justice. The broadcast ignited a media frenzy, feeding an insatiable appetite for every detail of this unfolding drama. When the Bronco finally stopped at Simpson's home in Brentwood, and he surrendered peacefully, the chase was over, but the story was far from finished. This event marked a turning point, ushering in a trial that would dominate headlines, redefine media coverage, and force America to confront difficult questions about celebrity, race, and justice. The white Bronco chase remains etched in the collective memory, a moment where the lines between reality and spectacle blurred, forever altering the way the world watched and participated in the news. As the dust settled from the white Bronco chase, the next chapter in this unfolding drama quickly took shape. One that would captivate not only Los Angeles but the entire nation, and indeed the world. At the center stood O.J. Simpson, no longer just a former football star or actor, but the defendant in a murder trial that would become synonymous with media frenzy and social upheaval. To mount his defense, Simpson assembled what quickly became known as the Dream Team, a powerhouse lineup of legal minds that included Robert Shapiro, Johnny Cochran, F. Lee Bailey, and Alan Dershowitz, each a titan in the world of criminal law. Together, they crafted a defense strategy that would be as much about the courtroom as it was about the court of public opinion. From the very first day of the trial, proceedings were televised live, allowing millions of Americans to witness every moment, the testimonies, the evidence, and the emotional exchanges. This level of media access was unprecedented, transforming a criminal trial into a national spectacle. Families gathered around television sets, talk shows dissected every detail, and newspapers churned out headlines that dominated front pages. The trial became a mirror reflecting deep and often uncomfortable divisions within American society. Race, class, and justice converged in a way that few cases before had dared to do. For many African Americans, O.J. Simpson symbolized a victory against a historically biased criminal justice system. His legal team skillfully highlighted issues of racial profiling and police misconduct, tapping into a legacy of mistrust that resonated deeply. Conversely, others viewed the trial through a different lens, believing in the gravity of the charges and demanding justice for the victims. This cultural divide played out not only in court but across dinner tables, newsrooms, and communities, making the trial a catalyst for nationwide conversations about race relations and the power dynamics within the American legal system. In the courtroom, the drama was relentless. The Dream Team's charismatic attorneys challenged the prosecution with rigorous cross-examinations and high-profile tactics, including the now iconic glove demonstration that would come to symbolize the trial's pivotal moments. Simpson's composed presence in court contrasted sharply with the emotional testimonies and graphic evidence presented by the prosecution, creating a gripping narrative that kept viewers on edge. As the trial unfolded day by day, it became clear that this was more than a murder case. It was a cultural phenomenon, a collision of fame, media, race, and justice that gripped a nation and shaped the very fabric of American society. The courtroom of the O.J. Simpson trial became a stage for some of the most unforgettable and dramatic moments in legal history, moments that would forever be etched into the collective memory of a captivated nation. Among these, none was more iconic, or more symbolic, than the moment when the prosecution presented a single leather glove, found at the crime scene, that they claimed belonged to Simpson. In a scene watched by millions, the defense team, led by the charismatic Johnny Cochran, invited Simpson to try on the glove. To the astonishment of many, the glove appeared too tight, leading Cochran to famously declare, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." This theatrical demonstration became a turning point, encapsulating the trial's complex dance between hard evidence and reasonable doubt. But the glove was only one piece of a much larger, and far more intricate, puzzle. Scientific advancements brought DNA evidence to the forefront, with forensic experts testifying to the presence of Simpson's genetic material at the crime scene. However, the defense swiftly challenged the integrity of this evidence, alleging contamination and mishandling by the Los Angeles Police Department. The prosecution's case, built heavily on these scientific findings, was thus undermined by questions of trust and procedural errors. The defense also emphasized systemic issues, raising concerns about racial bias and police misconduct, particularly focusing on Detective Mark Furman, whose credibility was attacked with allegations of racism. The trial transcended beyond facts and figures. It was a carefully choreographed performance of legal strategy, media manipulation, and public persuasion. Lawyers debated not only the evidence but the narrative itself. What story would the jury believe? Was the glove too small, or was the evidence overwhelming? Was Simpson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, or did the defense successfully plant seeds of uncertainty? This interplay of doubt and proof fueled endless discussions, with the public deeply divided. The courtroom became a theater where law met drama, where science battled emotion, and where every gesture, word, and reaction carried immense weight. This tension, between what was seen and unseen, proven and presumed, would define the trial and captivate a nation on the edge of its seat. In the end, it was this reasonable doubt, born from moments like the glove demonstration and the contested DNA evidence, that would become the cornerstone of Simpson's defense, and ultimately shape the verdict that followed. After months of intense courtroom drama, a flood of testimony, and millions watching every twist and turn, the moment that had gripped America finally arrived. On October 3, 1995, the jury delivered their verdict, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The announcement sent shockwaves across the nation, eliciting jubilation, disbelief, outrage, and profound debate. For many in the African American community, the verdict was seen as a hard-won victory against a justice system often criticized for racial bias. It was a moment that spoke to deeper societal struggles and the historic mistrust between minority communities and law enforcement. Conversely, for many others, the verdict was a bitter disappointment, a miscarriage of justice that left the memory of the victims overshadowed by the controversy. The country was starkly divided. Conversations erupted across media outlets, dinner tables, and workplaces, and the trial's impact rippled far beyond the courtroom. But this was not the end of the legal saga. Although acquitted in criminal court, Simpson faced a civil lawsuit brought by the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Unlike criminal trials, civil trials require a lower burden of proof, preponderance of evidence rather than beyond a reasonable doubt. In 1997, the civil trial concluded with Simpson being found liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole and Ron. He was ordered to pay substantial damages to the families, a ruling that carried significant financial consequences and a public acknowledgement of responsibility. This civil case further complicated Simpson's legacy, straddling the line between legal innocence and moral accountability in the eyes of many. The combined weight of the criminal and civil proceedings reshaped the conversation around justice, celebrity, and accountability. O.J. Simpson, once a celebrated athlete and entertainer, was now forever entwined with one of the most controversial legal battles in American history, a story that continues to provoke discussion and reflection decades later. The verdict may have closed the courtroom doors, but for O.J. Simpson, the story was far from over. In the years following the trial, Simpson's life became a complex mix of public fascination, controversy, and personal exile. One of the most polarizing moments came with the release of his 2007 book, If I Did It. Published posthumously by his publisher after intense backlash, the book was presented as a hypothetical confession, a chilling exploration of how Simpson might have committed the murders. The book's very existence sparked outrage and disgust across the nation, reigniting wounds and raising profound ethical questions about profiting from tragedy. Despite the fury, it also cemented Simpson's status as a figure who defied societal norms and continued to provoke public debate. Simpson's appearances in interviews during this period were equally telling, occasionally candid, often controversial, and always closely scrutinized. In these rare glimpses into his mindset, he alternated between defiance and vulnerability, challenging public perceptions while grappling with his own complex legacy. Yet, with his public life so heavily shadowed by the trial, Simpson largely retreated from the spotlight. He lived a life marked by isolation, away from the adoring crowds and flashing cameras that once followed his every move. Over time, he sought a quieter existence, sometimes resurfacing in the media, but never able to fully escape the long shadow of his past. His post-trial years serve as a powerful reminder of how deeply the events of those months altered the trajectory of a man who had once been celebrated as an American icon. The story of O.J. Simpson is one of triumph and tragedy, fame and infamy, an enduring cautionary tale about the complexities of justice, celebrity, and the human condition. O.J. Simpson's story did not end with the famous trial and its aftermath. Rather, it took on new chapters of complexity that further cemented his legacy as one of the most controversial figures in modern American history. In 2007, Simpson found himself once again at the center of a legal storm, but this time for an entirely different set of crimes. Arrested in Las Vegas on charges including armed robbery and kidnapping, Simpson was accused of orchestrating a confrontation to retrieve sports memorabilia that he claimed was rightfully his. The 2008 trial was a stark departure from the glitz and glamour that had once defined his public image. This time, the courtroom drama was raw and unvarnished, a sobering reminder of how far the man had fallen from his days as a celebrated athlete and actor. Convicted in 2008, Simpson was sentenced to 33 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 9 years. He served nearly 9 years behind bars, a period that dramatically reshaped his public identity. Released on parole in 2017, Simpson returned to a world that had moved on, but his reputation remained irrevocably tarnished. The shadow of his criminal convictions, the unresolved questions from the murder trial, and his highly publicized legal troubles painted a portrait of a man whose legacy was forever fractured. Despite attempts to maintain some semblance of normalcy, O.J. Simpson's name is often synonymous with scandal, controversy, and the limits of redemption in the public eye. His story is a compelling reflection on the intersection of fame and infamy, how the heights of celebrity can be swiftly undermined by legal and personal downfall. Today, Simpson's legacy serves as a cautionary tale that echoes beyond sports and entertainment, touching on themes of justice, media spectacle, and the enduring impact of public scrutiny. As one chapter of Hollywood's most notorious legal dramas closed with O.J. Simpson's fall from grace and years behind bars, the shadows of controversy continued to loom large over another figure whose life and career were shaped by trauma, scandal, and relentless public scrutiny. Roman Polanski, an artist whose story is as complex as it is haunting, stands apart not only for his enduring contributions to cinema, but for the extraordinary life that preceded and surrounded his work. Born into the turmoil of pre-war Europe, Polanski's early years were marked by unimaginable hardship. A survivor of the Holocaust, he lost his mother in Auschwitz, a loss that would forever shape his worldview and artistic vision. Emerging from this dark past, Polanski carved a path through the world of film that combined raw emotion, psychological intensity, and visionary storytelling. His work earned international acclaim, with masterpieces like Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown cementing his reputation as one of cinema's great auteurs. Yet, the shadows followed him. In 1969, the brutal murders carried out by followers of Charles Manson at his Los Angeles home shocked the world and marked a turning point in his personal life. Despite the horrors that touched his doorstep, Polanski continued to create films that challenged and captivated audiences, his resilience a testament to the enduring power of art amid adversity. Tonight, we delve into the life of this survivor and visionary, exploring the complexities of a man whose story intertwines tragedy, genius, and exile. The year 1977 marked a seismic shift in Roman Polanski's life and career, one that would cast a long and controversial shadow over the legacy of this celebrated filmmaker. In March of that year, Polanski was arrested and charged with unlawful sexual intercourse with a 13-year-old girl, an accusation that sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the global film community. The case began when Samantha Geimer, a young aspiring model, was brought to Polanski's residence under the pretense of a photo shoot. What followed was a night that would lead to accusations, legal battles, and a scandal that captured the world's attention. Polanski pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of unlawful sexual intercourse, a part of a plea bargain that was expected to resolve the matter quietly. However, the situation rapidly escalated as the judge handling the case signaled an intention to impose a harsher sentence than initially anticipated. Fearing imprisonment, Polanski fled the United States, embarking on a self-imposed exile that would last decades. This flight transformed the legal case into an international saga of extradition attempts, legal wrangling, and ongoing public debate. The scandal not only derailed Polanski's Hollywood career but also polarized opinions across the globe, some viewing him as a fugitive evading justice, others as a victim of a harsh legal system. Throughout the years, Polanski maintained a presence in the film world, often working and living in Europe, but the 1977 charges remained a defining and contentious element of his story. This chapter in his life forces us to grapple with complex questions about justice, accountability, and the enduring impact of fame. The courtroom battles that unfolded around Roman Polanski in 1977 were far from straightforward. They were a tumultuous mix of legal strategy, psychological assessment, and unexpected twists that would ultimately change the course of his life. Initially, Polanski entered into a plea deal, admitting guilt to a reduced charge of unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor. This arrangement was meant to bring a swift resolution to the case, allowing Polanski to avoid a lengthy trial. However, the calm was short-lived. As sentencing loomed, the judge, known for his tough stance, signaled his dissatisfaction with the deal, expressing concerns that the agreed-upon sentence was too lenient given the gravity of the crime. Amid growing pressure, Polanski underwent psychological evaluations, a process intended to assess his mental state and suitability for sentencing. The reports revealed a complex and troubled individual, grappling with personal demons and the heavy weight of his past traumas. These assessments became a focal point in the legal proceedings, influencing opinions within the court and adding layers of nuance to the case. Meanwhile, Polanski's legal team engaged in aggressive maneuvering, attempting to navigate the volatile atmosphere and protect their client from what they saw as an unjust escalation. Despite their efforts, the mounting tension and the prospect of a harsher sentence pushed Polanski to make a drastic decision. In a move that shocked both the public and the legal community, he fled the United States, leaving behind a trial that would remain unresolved for decades. This act transformed what might have been a contained legal matter into an enduring international controversy. The courtroom chaos surrounding Polanski was more than just a legal drama. It was a reflection of a man caught between the demands of justice, the complexities of his own psyche, and the fierce battles of the legal system. As the weight of the legal system pressed down, Roman Polanski faced a moment of reckoning that would forever alter the trajectory of his life. In 1978, just days before his scheduled sentencing, Polanski made a dramatic and decisive move. He fled the United States. Boarding a plane bound for Europe, he escaped the jurisdiction of the American court, effectively evading the impending punishment that awaited him. This sudden departure shocked Hollywood, the media, and the public alike. For a man whose work had been celebrated on the world stage, this flight transformed him overnight from a revered filmmaker into a fugitive. Polanski's choice plunged him into a decades-long exile, a life defined by constant legal uncertainty, travel restrictions, and the shadow of a warrant that would follow him relentlessly. Europe became his sanctuary, a place where he could continue to create and live, albeit with the ever-present knowledge that the U.S. authorities could demand his extradition at any time. His exile was not a quiet one. It was marked by continuous media attention, legal battles, and a divided public opinion. Supporters argued that the sentence he faced was excessively harsh, while detractors insisted that justice must be served regardless of his artistic achievements. During this period, Polanski continued to direct critically acclaimed films across Europe, including The Pianist, which won him an Academy Award in 2003. Yet, even as he garnered praise and accolades, the unresolved legal case cast a persistent shadow over his career. Polanski's flight from the U.S. is more than a footnote in his biography. It is a defining chapter that encapsulates the tension between art and accountability, freedom and responsibility. His story challenges us to consider the complexities of justice in the context of celebrity and personal history, a conversation that remains as charged today as it was over 4 decades ago. Roman Polanski's exile from the United States did not signal the end of his creative output. On the contrary, it marked the beginning of a complex chapter where artistry and controversy collided on a global stage. Settling primarily in Europe, Polanski continued to direct films that captivated audiences and critics alike, proving that his visionary storytelling remained undiminished despite the legal storms swirling around him. Among his most celebrated works during this period was The Pianist, 2002, a deeply personal film inspired by the memoir of the Ladislaw Spilman, a Jewish pianist who survived the horrors of the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. The film's raw emotional power and haunting portrayal of survival struck a universal chord, earning Polanski his first Academy Award for Best Director and revitalizing his reputation in the cinematic world. Yet, alongside these artistic triumphs, controversy dogged every step of his career. While many hailed Polanski as a misunderstood genius, others viewed his continued success as a troubling testament to the complicated intersection of celebrity and justice. Film festivals, award ceremonies, and public events often became battlegrounds for passionate debates about separating the artist from the art. Despite facing boycotts and protests, Polanski maintained a steady pace of work, producing films like The Ghost Rider, 2010, and Carnage, 2011, further cementing his position as a master of his craft. His persistence in the face of adversity highlighted a remarkable resilience, though the cloud of his past offenses continued to provoke heated discussion in media and cultural circles. Polanski's life abroad embodies a paradox, a man both celebrated and condemned, creating some of the most compelling cinema of his generation while living with the consequences of choices made decades earlier. His story invites reflection on the capacity for redemption, the power of art to transcend controversy, and the enduring complexities of public judgment. Despite Roman Polanski's decades-long exile, the pursuit of justice remained a persistent and contentious saga, marked by legal battles that transcended borders and tested international diplomacy. For years, U.S. authorities sought to bring Polanski back to face sentencing, launching multiple efforts to extradite him from Europe. These attempts were fraught with complexity, involving varying extradition treaties, political considerations, and the differing legal standards of several countries. The most significant breakthrough came in 2009, when Polanski was arrested upon arrival in Switzerland during a film festival. This arrest sent shockwaves through the film industry and reignited worldwide debate about accountability and forgiveness. Switzerland's legal system became the battleground where the decades-old case was reignited. The Swiss courts carefully weighed the U.S. request, balancing diplomatic pressures against concerns over procedural fairness and Polanski's rights. Amid this legal wrangling, Polanski's defenders rallied in his support, arguing that the case was unjustly prolonged and that he had already faced significant consequences. Governments, human rights organizations, and cultural figures weighed in, transforming what could have been a straightforward legal matter into a diplomatic and public relations quagmire. After months of hearings, the Swiss justice system ultimately declined the extradition request in 2010, citing issues with the original U.S. proceedings. Yet, the arrest and subsequent legal actions kept Polanski's case in the international spotlight, reminding the world that the quest for justice in high-profile cases is rarely simple. This chapter illustrates the challenges of cross-border law enforcement when celebrity, politics, and the passage of time intertwine. Roman Polanski's legal battles serve as a powerful example of how the wheels of justice can turn slowly and unevenly, especially when they collide with the complexities of international law and cultural divides. Roman Polanski's story is one that has fueled a fierce and ongoing public debate, a clash between artistic reverence and moral condemnation that continues to divide opinions around the world. Within Hollywood and the film industry, Polanski has retained a significant base of support, a community of filmmakers, actors, and critics who emphasize his undeniable contributions to cinema. Many defend his work as groundbreaking and essential, arguing that his creative genius should be considered separately from his personal life and legal controversies. At prestigious film festivals and awards ceremonies, his films have often been celebrated with standing ovations and accolades, a testament to the respect he commands among peers. Yet, beyond the glitz and glamour of the industry, a powerful and vocal group of activists and survivors has persistently challenged this narrative. They argue that Polanski's actions cannot be excused or overlooked, no matter his artistic achievements. For them, the case is not just a legal matter but a profound question of justice, accountability, and the treatment of victims within powerful institutions. This division reflects a larger cultural reckoning, especially in the era of #MeToo and growing awareness about abuse and consent. Public opinion remains sharply split. Some view Polanski as a tragic figure, a talented artist haunted by personal demons and a flawed justice system. Others see him as a symbol of systemic failure, where privilege and celebrity allow offenders to evade consequences. This polarization extends beyond the courtroom and red carpet. It permeates social media, academic discourse, and cultural criticism. The debate over Polanski is emblematic of a broader struggle to reconcile the tension between valuing artistic legacy and demanding ethical responsibility. It asks us to confront difficult questions. Can we separate the art from the artist? Should past crimes be judged differently with the passage of time? And how do we balance forgiveness with justice in the public eye? Roman Polanski's story is not just about one man. It is a reflection of society's evolving values, its contradictions, and its ongoing search for truth and fairness. Roman Polanski's legacy stands as one of the most complex and controversial in the history of cinema. His body of work is undeniably influential. Films like Rosemary's Baby, Chinatown, and The Pianist have left an indelible mark on the art of filmmaking, inspiring countless directors and captivating audiences worldwide with their innovation, psychological depth, and storytelling mastery. Yet, this artistic brilliance exists inextricably intertwined with the grave and disturbing circumstances of his personal life. The crimes he was accused of and admitted to, the decades spent evading legal consequences, and the profound moral questions that still haunt his name. For many, Polanski represents a duality that is difficult to reconcile: a visionary artist whose creative genius shaped modern cinema, and a man whose actions caused immeasurable harm and suffering. This duality forces society, critics, and fans alike to grapple with uncomfortable questions about justice, forgiveness, and the price of fame. Is it possible, or even ethical, to separate the artist from the art? Can one celebrate cinematic achievements without condoning the personal transgressions behind them? Or does honoring his work inadvertently silence the voices of victims and perpetuate a culture of impunity? Historians and cultural commentators often place Polanski's story within a larger context of power dynamics, celebrity privilege, and the evolving standards of accountability. As societal values shift and conversations about abuse and responsibility gain prominence, Polanski's case serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of redemption and the enduring impact of past actions. His films continue to be studied and appreciated for their craft, but his name also remains a lightning rod for debate, protest, and reflection. Ultimately, Roman Polanski's legacy is a reminder that history is rarely black and white. It is a tapestry woven with both brilliance and darkness, one that challenges us to hold space for complexity, to listen to all voices, and to reckon honestly with the past as we shape the cultural narratives of the future. As we close this chapter on some of Hollywood's most shocking court cases, we are left with stories that defy easy answers. Michael Jackson's rise and fall, marked by both unparalleled artistry and deep controversy. O.J. Simpson's journey from celebrated athlete to a symbol of justice's complexities and cultural divides. And Roman Polanski's exile, a haunting reminder of how brilliance and darkness can coexist in the public eye. These narratives are not just about fame or scandal. They challenge us to reflect on justice, accountability, and the human frailty behind the legends. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the shadows of stardom and the courts that sought to hold them accountable. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts below. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? What hour is it as these stories unfold? Until next time, may your night be peaceful and your mind curious. Good night.